Today we're going to be making a ciabatta bread. Fresh bread made at home is absolutely the best thing. So, this bread uses an overnight starter. Starters are a mixture of yeast, flour, and water that we let set either in the refrigerator or at room temperature to build up flavor and a rise in our bread. So as the yeast eats the natural sugars, it produces CO2, which produces the gas, which is going to leaven the bread. It also produces a really, really nice flavor. So we're going to get started right now with making the starter first. Okay, so here we have our ingredients for our ciabatta starter. So pre-measured, we have 200 grams of AP flour. Bread flour would actually be optimal, but AP works just as well. And here we have an equal amount, 200 grams of water. And in here, a quarter teaspoon or about 1 gram of instant yeast. So we're just gonna add the ingredients together. And I'm gonna use the handle end of a wooden spoon. It's a little bit easier to mix this up because it's gonna be very wet. Now what the starter is for is we're gonna put this in with our bread dough tomorrow. We're gonna let this sit overnight, and this is gonna develop a lot of flavor overnight. And the yeast is gonna produce CO2, which is gonna give us all of that nice flavor that we associate with bread. It's gonna ferment. Okay, so we'll mix this up really good. And that's it. So I'm gonna cover this with plastic wrap, and I'm gonna set it on the top shelf of our fridge. Okay, so here we have a starter that I made yesterday, and then the rest of the ingredients measured out. So in here I have 300 grams of AP flour, another 200 grams of warm water, and another quarter teaspoon or 1 gram of the instant yeast. I'm gonna add the warm water to the starter to loosen it up, because it's coming out of the fridge and it's a little bit cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and stir this up and get it going, because we're gonna be using a mixer today. This is a very high hydration dough, they call that. It's about 80% hydration, as a matter of fact. So mixing this by hand would be a little bit difficult. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the yeast. Okay, and then lastly, I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt. Okay, and we're gonna bring the bowl over to the mixer. In this case, we're gonna be using the paddle attachment and not the dough hook. And that again is because of this really high hydration dough. It's gonna be really sticky. So we're gonna mix it on speed 1 for 1 minute, speed 2 for 1 minute, and then speed 4 for probably about 3 minutes. And what we're looking for is the dough to pull away from the sides of the bowl and form a ball around the paddle. Once that happens, regardless of the time, the dough is ready to go. So we're gonna start now. Speed 1 for about 1 minute. Okay, so you can see that the dough has now cleared the sides of the bowl. Okay, so today's dough took a little bit longer. Okay, so with baking, not everything is, on the exact second. It can depend on the temperature of the water, the starter that came out of the fridge, the temperature of the flour. That'll all have an effect on gluten development. But what we're looking for is you want to see the gluten develop into those strands. So as it's mixing, you'll see it kind of pull into these long strands. I'll turn it on for a minute. And you can see that the dough has now developed the gluten necessary to give it structure. And the structure is what's going to give it the texture that we're looking for in the end. If we didn't mix it so the gluten activated, we'd just end up with these sort of bread pancake things that would be really crumbly. Here we're going to have that nice chew. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my hands. Okay, and what this is going to allow me to do is to grab the dough without it sticking so much to my hands. And I'm going to take a little bit with the paddle, and you can see all that gluten development. Okay, and I'm gonna wet my hands again. Okay. And I'm gonna clean off the paddle as best I can. Okay. Now I should add that this bowl has been lightly oiled with just a neutral oil, like a canola oil or vegetable oil. I do recommend using actual oil as opposed to a pan spray. Okay, but if you don't have anything else, pan spray will work. Okay, I made a little bit of a mess here. So then we'll get the rest of the dough into the bowl. Okay, so it should come out fairly clean. You might have a little bit of residue left in there. That's okay. Get it out the best you can. And I'll get this little bit off the counter. Okay. So then what we're gonna go ahead and do is cover this with plastic wrap, stick it in a spot in your house where it won't be disturbed for 45 minutes. So make sure we set a timer for 45 minutes. Okay, so we've come to the end of our 45 minutes. And so now we're gonna go over here to the dough and we're going to flip it, sort of knock it down a little bit. Okay. And the reason we're doing this is we want to redistribute the temperature. Okay, so we want to make sure that the top is the same temperature as the inside. Okay, we're also going to be redistributing the yeast, which is going to allow for the dough to keep leavening throughout the next phase. So we're going to end up doing this a total of 3 times. So here's the first one, and then we're going to do this exact process 2 more times after this. So I'm just going to wet my hands so that the dough doesn't stick. Okay, I'm going to pick it up, fold it over onto itself, wet my fingers a little bit. Okay. All right, this is going to help build structure for the dough. So each time we do this, it should get a little bit more texture to it, a little bit sort of thicker dough consistency. All right, so this is 1 of 3 times. Okay, so here we are at the end of our second 45-minute fermentation. Okay, so I'm gonna wet my hands. I'm gonna pick up the dough, fold it over, rotate the bowl. 2. A third time. And then a 4th. All right. And we'll put the plastic back on. Okay. And we'll set the timer for another 45 minutes. Okay, so we finished 2 of our flip and fermentation periods. So this is going to be the 3rd flip, and we're gonna let this sit for the last 45 minutes. So same thing, we're gonna wet our hands, flip it over. Okay, you can see that the dough is growing, okay, and it's gaining structure, and it's becoming closer to a finished dough. So, all right, there we go. Just roll that over. Okay, then we're gonna cover this with plastic wrap. 1 more time. This will be the last time you have to do this. Okay, and then we're gonna set the timer for 45 minutes. And we'll check back in. Okay, so here we've come to the 45 minutes for the 3rd time that the dough has fermented. And we can see that we have some gas building up in there, which is exactly what we want. The dough has increased in size, which is also what we want. Okay, so at this point, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna portion the dough into the final size and shape of our rolls. We're gonna get 8 ciabatta rolls out of this. Now here, I have what's called a baker's couche already set up. Okay, so this is just a material that's used to help shape different breads, baguettes, in this case, the ciabatta. Now, you probably don't have one of these at home, which is okay. If you want to get one, you can get them online. They're probably around less than $10. But chances are you might have an old pillowcase at home that you're willing to part with. Okay, so if you do, here's the opened end. Okay, you just want to cut down this side and this side, leaving that seam intact, and then you'll end up with probably around a 6-foot piece of cloth linen. So when we're making these, we want to make sure we're using something that's all cotton, natural material. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and flour the work surface now. So I have some flour here. And I just have one of these little mesh strainers, which is really great for distributing the flour somewhat evenly over the counter. Okay, also gonna do the same thing on here. Okay, this is a really wet dough, like we said in the beginning, high hydration, so it's still very sticky, okay, which is why we need the flour. I'm gonna keep that right there in case I need it. Now, it's really important that we don't deflate all this nice gas that we've had building up. This is what's gonna give ciabatta its famous bread that's, you know, got all those holes you can see when you cut into it. So we're just gonna let gravity do its thing, okay? And it should eventually drop out of the ball. Perfect. All right. Now at this point, I'm gonna come back with some more flour, because if I even try to touch this, it's gonna stick to my fingers. Okay, so the flour that's on the outside now will stay on the outside. You can always brush it off too. It's not going to have an effect on whether or not the dough gets dried out or anything like that. So I'm gonna try and coax it a little bit into more of a rectangular shape. Okay. All right. Okay. This is called a bench knife. If you don't have one of these at home, it's okay. You can use a kitchen knife, a cake cutter, anything that has a blade that will cut through bread dough. Doesn't need to be sharp. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut this across, making 2 rectangular pieces. Okay, the thing about this dough is it's kind of rustic. I'm not worried too much about the weight here. I'm not gonna get out my kitchen scale or anything like that. Okay, I'm gonna put a little bit more flour there. And then I'm gonna try and eyeball this into approximately 4 pieces that are roughly the same size. So I'm gonna cut it in half first. This side I can see is a little thicker, so I'm gonna come a little to the left. Okay, I'm gonna cut that in half. Okay, and then I'm gonna cut this in half. Okay, like I said, we're not too worried about all the pieces looking exactly the same. It's kind of what makes it fun. It's homemade bread. Okay, and then we're gonna very carefully bring these over to the couche. Okay, I have that back lip there against the wall to sort of bolster the edge. Okay, and then we're gonna fold up that edge there. And that'll keep the bread from spilling out and becoming a pancake, okay? Because these breads, we haven't shaped them, okay? So they're very loose and they will spread out as we let them do their final proofing. So same thing, cutting it in half, cutting it in half, and into the 4th, okay? All right. Tilt this guy up. Okay. And go. All right. Put that there. I'll put the bread knife, the bench knife there to support the final roll. All right. And then just take another clean cotton towel and just cover them up. Let them sleep there for a little while. Okay. Now in the meantime, we're going to come over here. Okay. We're going to set a timer. Well, first we're going to preheat the oven to 450 degrees. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and set a timer for 20 minutes. So these ciabatta, as they sit on the couche right now, we're going to proof for 20 minutes. While the oven is preheating, I also want to show you inside. I have an upside down sheet tray, baking tray. Okay. We have a pizza stone. If you don't, just put a second tray here, upside down. And in the very bottom, on the bottom of your oven, whether it's electric or gas, it doesn't matter. You wanna have some kind of oven-proof pan. Here we have a 10-inch cast iron skillet, and that's gonna come into play later when we add our hot water, okay? The reason we're gonna add this hot water is when it hits that pan, it's gonna create a steamy environment inside of the oven, which is then going to give the ciabatta its textbook crispy crust. Okay, so it allows us to bake bread at a higher temperature without the outside cooking before the inside has a chance to catch up. So we will check back here in 20 minutes and I'll show you how to load the ciabatta onto the baking peel and we'll transfer them into the hot oven. Okay, so it's been around 20 minutes. Okay, so our dough has had time to relax. Okay, it's not a really long proofing time, but after we cut it, we want to give the dough a chance to relax, take on the shape that it's going to be, and give the chance for any gas that may have been pushed out to kind of give it a chance to come back. So I'm going to carefully load these onto this parchment paper. Now I have a tray here that has a lip on it that makes things easy for sliding off and on. If you don't have one of those, you can use another tray, again, flipped over on the back side with the paper, and that way the lip won't get into the way and you'll be able to slide it right off. You can also use a cutting board. Just be careful and quick with your movements because you don't want the plastic cutting board to be sitting on a hot stone or a hot tray in the oven. Okay, so here we go. I'm just gonna unroll the couche, okay? And I'm gonna put 4 on here at a time. Okay? You can pick them up, but again, just be gentle, okay? 1, flour my fingers a little bit. Okay. 2, 3, and the 4th. All right, and I'm gonna come over here, open the oven, right? Slide the whole rack out, and then very carefully. And I can get the next 4. And these ones I might put a little closer together because the pizza stone is round, and I want to make sure that the bread is all sitting on the surface of the stone, not hanging over the edge. So they might even grow into each other a lot when they get the oven spring, which is what happens when bread hits a hot oven. Okay, so we have here the last 4. All right, I'm going to slide them right up on top here. And to our pizza stone. The last step, and this is a very, very careful step, is I'm going to pull out this hot pan. I'm going to introduce hot water, and it's going to steam a lot. It's going to create a steamy environment, and then I'm going to hit up in the oven, maybe on the bread a little bit, everywhere, with some water, close the door. Okay. We're going to set a timer for 20 minutes, and we'll see you back here. Okay, so here we are, I'm counting down the few final seconds of the 20 minutes that we have been baking our ciabatta rolls. So we're gonna go ahead and take a look and see if we like them. If we don't, we can always add another minute, keep them in there for another minute or so. Okay. So let's take a look. The bottom ones look pretty good, but I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna leave the bottom ones in for a minute, and I'm just gonna take out the top 4 right now. Okay, so these look nice and golden, which is just exactly what we're looking for. So So I'm gonna go ahead and set the timer for another minute. All right, and we'll check back in 1 minute on the last 4. Okay, so here we are returning to the bottom 4 bowls. We actually ended up leaving them in for 2 minutes, and I'm gonna go ahead and take them out at this point. All right, so obviously the ones on the top got a little bit more color. Heat rises, so the top of the oven is a little bit hotter, which would explain the color. But these are quite nice as well. So we're gonna go ahead, slide those onto the cooling rack. Okay, so we've let the rolls now cool on our cooling rack all the way down. Okay, this is a really important part of the process. I think we're tempted to take the bread out and want to eat it while it's warm. There's still a lot of activity going on inside of the crust, even while the bread is cooling. It's actually finishing the final part of its cooking process. There's a lot of steam built up in there, which equals a lot of moisture that we want to keep inside the bread. So we want to let it cool all the way down. If you really want to eat it warm, let it cool down and then heat it up, whether it be in the oven or you cut it, put it in the toaster, that's up to you. So we'll go ahead and we'll grab one. Let's grab this one. Okay, and you can hear the crust. Okay, it's nice and crispy, which is what we wanted. Okay. And then we're gonna cut into it. Okay. And we're gonna see that really beautiful inside with all those nice nooks and crannies and holes there that we got from allowing our bread to fill with gas without deflating it and being really gentle. Okay, so here we go, the inside the ciabatta. Okay, so one thing I wanted to mention was we had used grams today to measure out our ingredients. So we have a kitchen scale. Okay, you can get lots of kitchen scales out there at your local kitchen supply stores. If you're not really shopping right now, which is understandable, you can go online and get some on online sites, of course, Amazon. You can get a really good digital gram scale, which will also have ounces. They all have both, for less than $15. So it's really worth having it, not just for making bread, but for all baking recipes, okay? Weight is exact. When you get recipes that are in volume, you really run the risk of having too much or too little of one ingredient. Okay? What might be 1 cup of flour on Tuesday might not be 1 cup of flour on Friday. It really depends. But when you have weight, it's indisputable, it will be exact. Grams is better, ounces are okay, they'll be fine, but you definitely want to get yourself a kitchen scale. You probably also saw me today using this little squirt bottle. Okay? You can get larger ones at a hardware store for people who want to mix up their own cleaning solutions to spray with. Those really work great. Okay, bring them home, give them a wash, and use them only for water, only for baking. Do not put anything else in them. This little one you can find in a drugstore like CVS, Walgreens, the pharmacy section over in Walmart. It's usually in with the hair care products and the cosmetics, and they run about $1, and they're great. Okay, label it like I have, water only. Don't let anybody put anything else in it. Okay, do not empty out a Windex bottle and wash it. Get something new that's never been used before. And that's great for being able to spray water in your oven. Most of the crusty bread recipes you'll see out there will involve some process of steam. So the commercial ovens actually have steamers built into them. They can control the amount of steam that they want. At home, we don't have that. So a lot of bread recipes will involve just spraying the bread really, really well before you put it in the oven. So I hope you've enjoyed watching today's video on ciabatta. So just imagine yourself with this nice homemade bread with just some butter on it. It's amazing. A nice brie sandwich, a BLT. The ciabatta is a really versatile piece of bread. So one last thing, 8 of them might be too many. Bag them up, fresh today after they've cooled completely. Put them in the freezer, okay, and they'll be perfect. Bring them out, let them defrost. Pop them in a 400-degree oven for maybe 6-7 minutes, and they'll crisp right back up just like the day you baked them. Okay, thanks for watching.